Hey everybody, Mike here. So I wanted to go over this set of two-way radios that are made by Motorola. These are the T600s, and I've owned these for a couple of years now. There's a lot of cool features that these radios have that a lot of radios don't have, which also puts these at a little bit pricier price point when it comes to purchasing these. Now when you get these, you get the two radios here, and they come in this nice little carrying case like you see here. And inside this carrying case, you've got your 12-volt adapter for your vehicle, so you can charge these radios up. It also comes with two single USB cables that have the micro USB on the ends. And then you get the wall charger here that has two cords that you can plug both radios in at the same time, which is the one I use all the time. Now it's recommended that you charge these radios up at least every 3 months to keep them fully charged if you don't use them all the time. Otherwise, the batteries will deplete from over time. Now stay tuned and bear with me for this video because I've got some things that I want to talk to you about that a lot of the other videos don't cover. These have an IP67 rating, so they are waterproof radios. Now what's really cool about these is if you were to drop these, let's just say in the lake, in a puddle of water, and it's dark and you can't see the radio, even though they're at the high vis color on them, there's two little sensors here on the end, and this will actually activate, if you hit water, it activates this flashlight on the bottom so that you can see that light, and that light will start to flash. That light won't go out until the sensors are dried off and you hit the button on the top here to kill the flashlight. So speaking of flashlight, you got this button here, and when you hit that, it gives you this nice red light. If you need to see something in low light, you don't need an actual flashlight. Then it does have this flashlight like you see here. It's not the brightest thing in the world, but the fact that you've got a two-way radio in your hand that also has a flashlight built in, that's pretty handy. Now something else that's kind of neat, I don't know that I'll ever use it, but they did take the time to think about putting a whistle in the end of your clip here. So on your belt clip, you've got a whistle. If you're in trouble, for some reason you couldn't yell or make enough noise, a whistle might be enough to get you heard in the event that you need help. Now, they advertise these radios as having a 35-mile range. Now, let's be realistic. That's not going to be optimum. The only time you're going to get that is if one person's on the top of a mountain and the other person might be down in a valley, and you got straight line of sight between the radios, and one person's obviously higher and the other person's lower. Realistically, if you're on open water and with no obstructions, you probably get close to 6 miles of range out of these radios. Now, if you're in a neighborhood or where there's a lot of trees, woods, whatnot, the best you're probably going to get out of these is 2 miles. That's still really good for what most people are going to be using these for, but don't expect to get 10 miles of range between neighborhoods or across the county. It's not going to happen. There's just too much interference.
We've also been super impressed with the clarity of these radios and how easy it is to understand the other person on the other walkie-talkie. The sound quality on these radios is probably the best of any other two-way radio that I've ever owned.
Now, when we're talking about channels, there's 22 different channels, and within each channel, there's 121 privacy codes. So that gives you quite a bit of range to be able to pick through, especially if you're in an area where maybe there's a lot of traffic on the other stations. You can go through and find a different station for each of these radios, or whoever's within your party to go through and find that. That way you're not on the same frequency talking to somebody else's. Now, something else you need to know, and I need you to hear this. The first 7 stations are going to be your family radio service or our FRS stations, which are also going to be good for GMRS as well. Stations 8 through 14 are going to be your standard just FRS stations. So basically you're able to use 1 through 14 with no restrictions. Stations 16 through 22 are GMRS only. You cannot use those stations legally without being signed up through the FCC and have a GMRS license. What that entails is you going on the FCC's website, registering yourself for an FRN number, and then purchasing a 10-year license for GMRS. By purchasing the GMRS license, you're good for 10 years and everyone in your immediate family can use that license. So if you're a family of 4, family of 6, one license is good for that whole family. That's because those stations transferred on a higher wattage. That's just the government's way of more or less keeping tabs on those radio stations. But I need you to understand that because there is a legality there on the GMRS stations if you're going to use those channels. Now, something else that's cool about these radios, just outside of talking on them two-way, it's got an emergency button built into the top. If you hold that button down for 3 seconds, the first 8 seconds, it's going to make that sound. It's no longer two-way. You can just talk without pushing the button. So as you can see here, we're talking and the other radio is still there. At the end of the 22 seconds, it'll let you know that that's over. So for 22 seconds, you can talk on this open mic, and then after that, it goes back to standard two-way radio. If you're in a situation where you're in an emergency, you can hit that button, sends everybody's radio up to max volume during that time, and then after that emergency tone goes away, you can talk. So that's kind of a neat feature to have. Now, this can also do weather radio. So by hitting the mode button here on top, you can toggle back and forth between two-way radio and your weather stations. You've got 11 different stations built into the radio that you can pick up your weather on. So by hitting mode, press the mode button, that gets you back to your two-way radio, and you can talk on it. So these are a really handy radio to have and keep around. They've got a lot of functionality built into them, unlike your standard two-way radios that you could pick up for a lot cheaper. But these are great, especially for someone that lives on a lake in the mountains, or if you're just out and about. The range is unparalleled compared to a lot of what's on the market these days. Not to mention, you could hit different things like these call sounds. which will also vibrate the other radio, so if they don't hear it, they might feel it if they got it on their waist. And then there's 20 different call tones you can pick up from here as well. So if you go into your menu, then you've changed your call tone there. So these are good for roughly 9 hours on the batteries that are included with them. And speaking of the battery, when you've got the nickel metal hydride battery that's included with this radio in here, this radio is capable of floating on top of water as well. They don't guarantee that if you've got any other battery in there other than what it comes with. But that's also a neat thing if you drop this, knowing that it should, in theory, float on top of the water. That's really neat. Now on the side here, you've also got 2 buttons here for your push to talk. One of them transmits at the lower power level and the other one's at a high. So that's good to keep in mind, especially when you're messing with those GMRS on that 1 through 7. That's going to be the difference between on the first 7 channels as to whether you're transmitting on FRS or GMRS. So these are just a great all-around radio. Anybody can use these. Just keep in mind on those last 8 channels, you technically cannot use those channel bands unless you've got that GMRS license. But outside of that, I've been really happy with these radios. They're by far my favorite two-way radio that I've owned. They've been one of the better purchases for us around the farm.